Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out to our Moonshot show. That's what I think we're calling it, although now I think they're changing it. But anyway, it is our bid to get rid of the Electoral College. I'm Joan Port, President, League of Women Voters of Virginia. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, LWV board member Jane Newell will present an outline of the League's program. We'd also like to welcome Barbara Paterick. Barbara was essential to pass the NPV Interstate Compact in Wisconsin. She's a member of the League of Women Voters of the Greater Green Bay area. And she is now, well, she was a member. She is now a member of the Oak Park River Forest in Illinois League. She has agreed to be here tonight to assist with answers. And we do ask that you put your questions in chat. And when Jane is done, I will read them off and hopefully get as many as possible answered. So with that, I'm going to again thank you for being here and thank Jane for taking on this. She's our strategic transformation person. So in the meantime, while she's doing strategic transformation, which is of course nothing big going on there right now, she's decided to take on this program. So we thank her, and Jane, it is all yours.
Well, thank you, Joan. And thank Barbara for being here tonight. I see her box. But we promised you that we wouldn't bother you before the election. So we're hoping that you all have had time to recover since November 5th and are interested in this because it's a timely time of the year. We will be electing a new president by the Electoral College officially on January 6th again. So this evening, I'm going to tell you about the League's effort and show you some of the materials that we have. And I hope that I'm set up to share.
You are indeed.
Okay, unfortunately, it is not showing up real well. Let's see if I can fix that. There. There's a lot to cover tonight, so I'm probably going to talk very quickly, and I'm glad that Joan asked you to put questions in the chat so that we can handle those toward the end. One of the things that I'm going to do backwards is I'm going to start with the asks. Usually this is at the end of the presentation, but we have things for you to go home and do, and they're very easy. The first one is tell 3 people about the League's efforts to abolish the Electoral College. So tell your family, your neighbors, at all of your your holiday parties this year, let everyone know. If you have social media gurus in your leagues, get them started because this can make some headway and the materials are available. Think about giving presentations to your communities. You know, the Rotary Club and the Lions Club are always looking for speakers. So this is a great topic that we have the materials to present. And then the fourth one, which is a Virginia ask, and that is that you sign up on the issue group page to join the group of interested members. So this, if you go to our state website, under advocacy, you'll see issue groups. And when you fill in the form down at the bottom, you will see the Electoral College Moonshot. So we ask that you add your name and your league to that information so that we can reach out to those people in Virginia who are interested in being involved in this. There are numerous resources. There is a league management site I'm showing here. We've set up a Google Drive so the people who sign up for the issue group will have a place to share materials. We have trifold brochures. We have buttons. You can see I'm wearing my one person, one vote button. We have, for some reason, we seem to have a lot of this book called Every Vote Equal, which if you really need something to read, is only about 1,200 pages, but it's a good reference guide. And we have National League coalitions that we can join and meet with from other states who may be a little further ahead of Virginia in getting these things done. And I think I spotted some people from Deerfield today.
You ask? It is a concept that the president has the constitutional authority to withhold or impound money from projects.
I don't know who this is.
I'm checking who it is. Everyone, can you please mute yourself? I don't see anybody right now.
Okay.
Unmuted.
I'll be going through 2 decks tonight just to show you what you can start with. One is abolish the Electoral College, and the second, because Virginia has not passed the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, is on that topic. So let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing this one and get started on the first one. Let's see here. There, get the right one. All right, you should be able to see the abolish the Electoral College
Yep.
slide deck.
You're good.
So we'll start by sharing the basics. What is the Electoral College and what is our role in this? And then also we'll cover problems with the Electoral College and the top myths or arguments in favor of it and why those are not actually, those can be disputed easily. So it's 538 people. That is the total number of US representatives and senators. And that is the total number of electors in the Electoral College. So the legislature picks the electors themselves, or did at the very beginning of our country. But now almost all states allow the voters to determine the party that's winning the election, and they currently use popular votes within their state. However, the league's position is that's not good enough. The league's position all the way back in 1970 was a direct popular vote method for electing the president and vice president is essential. Good news is we don't have to conduct a study. It's been done. And the position is clearly articulated. In 1970, the league also added to their position that the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is an acceptable way to achieve the goal of direct popular vote. Perhaps not the best way, but acceptable and likely to be a lot faster to achieve. So what's wrong with the Electoral College? Going back to the very beginning, the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787 debated how to set up our government and to write the Constitution. The most debated was how to achieve who was going to be president. 12 of the 13 original states participated. Many famous people, many of them from Virginia, were involved. The last thing to be settled was how to elect the president. There were proposals for it to be one person, one vote, but there were also proposals where state legislatures would make that determination. The Electoral College was something of a compromise. So what's wrong with the way it was initially set up? In the debate to create the nation, the northern states' population of free persons was much larger than the southern states. So they came up with something called the 3/5 compromise, where they counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a free person. They did that, so, and you can see in this graph, it evened out pretty much the population of the North and the South. This is how they compromised on setting up the number of representatives in Congress, but also, which then became the number of electors in the Electoral College. Madison, interestingly enough, was one who understood and is quoted here as saying the real difference of interest lies not between the large and small states, but between the northern and southern states. And the institution of slavery and its consequences form that line of discrimination. The counts, by the way, are similar to a census. It's the number, it's the head count. So women were actually counted in these numbers, even though we were not voting at that time either. So what happened? Well, the Electoral College ushered in the Jim Crow era. The Reconstruction era, immediately following the Civil War, actually improved the voting rights of the recently freed slaves and went along until about 1877, when the Electoral College failed to come up with the appropriate president. The popular vote didn't go to Hayes. It went to Tilden. And there were allocations of fraud. 4 states, Florida, North Carolina, Louisiana, and Oregon, had claims of victory on both sides of the election. So the two parties came up with a compromise that traded the newly awarded rights of Black people to shore up the malfunctioning Electoral College. So they came to an agreement that Hayes would become president and the troops that were managing Reconstruction would be removed from southern states. At that point, the Jim Crow era was ushered in. And it's never really completely been rectified. Even today, states with higher Black populations tend to have less power in the Electoral College. This may not be intentional in the way it was designed, but it does happen to be the way the math works. States with a higher percentage of Black residents tend to have less power in the Electoral College. So what is actually happening here? It's turning losers into winners. It allows a candidate with fewer votes from the people to win the presidency. You can see 5 examples of where that happened. In the current century, it's happened twice already, 2000 and 2016. Although I guess 2000 was technically not in the current century, but Al Gore would have won by popular vote, but George W. Bush won that election. You'll remember the era of hanging chads. In 2016, the popular vote went to Hillary Clinton, but the win went to Donald Trump. And then back in 1888, Cleveland and Benjamin Harris traded. Cleveland should have been elected by popular vote, lost to Harrison. And we mentioned Tilden and Hayes in 1876, and even back as far as John Quincy Adams' win, Andrew Jackson had popular vote. So what happens in making some votes count more than others? Well, it's because that every state has at least 3 electors, because they have 2 senators and at least 1 representative. Even the smallest states like Wyoming have 3 electors. Well, Florida, a much larger state, has 29 electors, but each of those electors represents 743,000 voters. Whereas in Wyoming, each of their electors represents only 192,000 voters. So needless to say, the voters in Wyoming have more power than the voters in Florida. I did a little calculation. In Virginia, it looks like we have 13 electors, and it looks like each of them represents about 670,000 voters. So we're like similar to Florida in that our votes don't count as strongly in the Electoral College as states like Wyoming. I have friends in North Dakota, and I keep razzing them about why they get a better vote on president than I do. But it's the same situation. They only get 3. North Carolina only has 3 electors, and their population is just a little bit larger than Wyoming. This is not an equal voting situation. Another big problem with the Electoral College is it emphasizes the swing states. Sometimes, well, you can see in this map, this was the 2020 election, those states that were considered the swing states at that time. In those states, because they're being elected by the Electoral College, the presidential candidates focus on those states and spend most of their money, their time, their television ads in those swing states, where unfortunately that also means that they're also going to be more beneficial to those particular states, and other states get left out. It's not a focus equally across all voters in all states. With direct popular vote, it would increase our access to candidates and widen the geographic scope of their campaigns. The 13 swing states down here in this table represented only 40% of the population in 2020. And they got 98% of the events and 100% of the TV ads. Needless to say, the rest. Now, I hear from people in swing states that we were lucky not to be one, because they did get a little bit tired of the TV ads, but really we're not getting the attention of the candidates. And when they win, then they owe the swing states. The Electoral College discourages voter participation. It decreases voter turnout in safe states. So, for example, California almost always goes blue. But there are Republican voters in California, so why would the voters even go? And then sometimes the Democratic voters feel, well, we're going to be blue anyway, why do I need to vote? So it doesn't encourage voting. Direct popular vote makes it clear that every vote counts and that you're one of the total numbers of voters. making that decision. The example at the bottom is from the 2016 and the 2020 voter turnout. Swing states voted to 66% of eligible voters voted, but in non-swing states, it was only 59 in 2016. In 2020, it was 72% in swing states, but only 66% of eligible voters in non-swing states. So we do see the more of a tendency to vote when the attention of the campaigns is focused on your state. Another problem. Electoral College makes it easy to cheat. I think all of us have probably seen news related to the 2020 election about duplicate slates of electors. And just the ability to claim fraud is easier with the Electoral College than it would be with just a direct popular vote count. In fact, back in that Tilden Hayes election, that you saw similarities all the way back then. The reason is in this table that the electoral votes, the additional votes needed to overturn the election in a popular election would have been over 3,526,000. But because we were using the Electoral College, we only needed 38 more. Trump in 2020 only needed 38 more electors, which could have been achieved by only 42,000 people. So it makes it easier to essentially not get the accurate answer as to who wins the election. And it gets even more complicated when there are more than two candidates running. So, Mythbusters. There are a whole lot of things that sort of conventional wisdom that people think about the Electoral College that we can prove are not really true. I'm going to start with myth number one. Without the Electoral College, our presidents would be chosen by a few big states like California and New York. Well, in fact, first of all, New York is smaller than Florida and Texas. They've got the wrong states. But it also wouldn't be true. Votes from most or all states would be needed to win the presidency. In this example, which is 2012, when Barack Obama was elected, it took votes from 39 states would have been needed to win it by popular vote. 39 states, not just two big states. So if you start looking at from left to right, the larger states, California, New York, Florida, and kept on going, you didn't achieve the level needed to win until you got to 39 of the 50 states. So it's not, that is a myth, not an actual mathematical statement. Myth number two. Without the Electoral College, our presidents would be chosen by just a few big cities. And always New York and Los Angeles and Chicago are usually referenced. But if you look again at the counts, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago represent only 5% of eligible voters. 95% are left. If you actually look at the top 10 biggest cities, that's only 8%. And the top 50 biggest cities only amount to 15% of the voters. Again, none of these can be run strictly by cities. I found this particularly interesting. The top 50 cities equate almost to the total rural population. So again, the rest of it is smaller towns and suburbs. So again, myth number 2 fails when we look at it very closely. Electoral College myth number 3 is that the Electoral College benefits only candidates from the Democratic Party. This is a bipartisan issue because it can impact either party. The example here was when Bush won in 2004. If you look at these maps carefully, Kerry could have won. And Kerry could have won fairly easily. He only needed a few votes in Ohio. That's the only state that would have been needed to be flipped in order for Kerry, the Democrat, to win, but the Republican won. So the Electoral College can hurt both, any party. So it is a nonpartisan issue. I don't have the actual popular vote count showing on this. Only the number of electors is showing. The last myth to address is that the Electoral College will never be abolished because it requires an amendment to the Constitution. Well, yes, it is difficult, but you can see in this chart at the bottom that 27 amendments have already been added to the Constitution. Those that are in yellow actually impacted how we elect presidents. So you can see typically the amendments come at times of crisis and conflict. They came around like right after the Civil War. You'll see a bunch of them. They tend to bunch in those areas. Sorry. They were feeling democracy was in crisis in some of these other eras around the turn of the century and around the civil rights era. So we've busted those 4 myths at least. So what needs to be done? The way to amend the Constitution, and many of us were involved in the Equal Rights Amendment, so we know a piece of this at least. But first of all, it takes a proposal in Congress with 2/3 vote of both the Senate and the House. Then it goes to the states to be ratified, and 3/4 of the states, or 38 states, need to ratify it. A constitutional convention is not required, and the position of the League is not in support of a constitutional convention. It is not necessary. This can be proposed, voted on in Congress, and then go to the states for individual state ratification. The actions in the House and Senate on this specific bill, back in the 68 to 70 period, there was a Gallup poll that 81% of Americans supported abolishing the Electoral College. The House of Representatives voted 338 to 70 to abolish it. The bill died in the Senate when it was filibustered by Southern Democrats. I think we were back to Jim Crow with that. Bills have been introduced in both the House and Senate since 2019, but have not yet been voted on. So it's not that there isn't some interest and there isn't popular approval of this in polls throughout the country. So what are we going to do? Well, the League is uniquely positioned to empower voters through education and advocacy at local, state, and national levels. So this is right now a multi-phased effort. Right now, we're focusing on really empowering voters through education and advocacy at the local, state, and national levels. Once empowered, voters can then be activated when the time is right to bring this momentum to Congress. So we mentioned early on what the asks were, and I'm going to stop this slide deck if I can, and go on to the alternative thing that we can be doing. And that is the national popular vote. And get the slide. Okay. I'm hoping you, whoops, that's not it. Sorry, wrong slide. Are you seeing the national popular vote slide deck?
It's a national popular vote honoring the will of the people, one person, one vote.
Thank you. I got the right one up. Okay. I have too many things open on my my
I feel
screen.
your pain. I feel your pain.
I'm going to quickly go through this because a lot, and I bring it up because this is really two presentations tonight. If we were going out to a community organization, we would probably speak to one or the other and not both at the same time. So a lot of what's in this second deck about the problems of the Electoral College and how it works, we've already talked about. I've already been through that in the first deck. But I wanted to show you that there are tools started. Now, this one is a little out of date. It goes back to 2020. And we could probably, for those of us who sign up in those issue groups, come up with a slide deck that is a little more up to date and focuses more on Virginia. Some of the states that are involved with using the first deck have already passed the NPV contract, excuse me. So it's one of those things we can't blend it completely together because not every state could use it at that time. So I'm going to quickly slide through and you'll see that it looks very similar. Something's wrong with it. It talks about the Electoral College, the problems, which we've talked about before, how electors are chosen, what our position is, what our possible solutions are. And then it gets to the interstate compact. There are lots of interstate compacts. They are simply contracts between states that allow them to do things like share information on criminals or cross the state borders with licenses. If we have enough states passing this compact, we could guarantee the presidency to the candidate who receives the most popular votes across all 50 states and the District of Columbia. So that's the emphasis. It's not the popular votes in your state, it's the popular votes in all states. This is sort of a question to the audience. Is the current way that we elect required by the US Constitution? And you know it's set up. The answer is no. Yes, we are required to use the Electoral College right now, unless the Constitution is amended, that is a requirement. But the way that the electors are selected and the way that they vote is determined state by state. So the interstate compact, each state can appoint the number of electors and how they vote. So if the state has signed the compact, then they are agreed to send electors to vote for that state who has the most votes nationwide. It turns out it requires 270 electors to get the majority of the 538 votes. So as soon as 270 electoral votes are achieved by states individually voting to support the NPVIC, then this can go into effect. It will award all of the state's electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote. And that improves the situation that we talked about earlier, where we have states that are merely ignored by the candidates. So it is a winner take all in the current system. In 2016, almost all campaign events were in the 12 states where Trump's support was between 43 and 51%. 2/3 of the events were in just 6 states. That year, Virginia was a swing state. This year, it wasn't. So it depends. The swing states do change from election to election. But that problem will be eliminated. The problem of the focus of the candidates only on the swing states, also known as battleground states. Swing states and battleground states are kind of used interchangeably, I believe. So the current winner takes all system, we've talked about this before, it creates voter apathy because those that are safe states, safely red or safely blue, do not encourage voter participation. I need to slip forward here. So it enables all states to be battleground or swing states. It respects the right of the state legislatures to replace winner-take-all laws and aligns with the U.S. Constitution and maintains the integrity of the Electoral College. In other words, this can go into effect without a constitutional amendment. Interestingly enough, the first state to approve the compact was our neighbor, Maryland. And they voted, I believe it was 2006, they approved the interstate compact. What you see here is a strange map, but you can see that there's been a lot of activity. Those that are green have already approved the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I believe they're up to 205 of the necessary 270 electors. Those that are in orange have been passed at least once in at least one chamber of their legislature. Yellow indicates passage by both, but haven't necessarily been totally approved yet. Blue indicates that at least they've started to discuss in at least one of their legislative committees. And gray indicates that the bill was introduced, but there's been no hearing. So it's still possible that we can get to the 270 electors needed with just the addition of a few of these states that are not yet green. We need 65 more. I'm going to the League supports the National Popular Vote Plan because every vote is equal. All votes in all states should and will count the same. It levels off that uneven playing field that we talked about before. The winner is the candidate who wins the most votes, and this should encourage greater voter turnout. And it works with one thing to note is we don't have to go through the constitutional amendment process. So this could be theoretically could be done before the next presidential election. All we need to do is get to 270. Okay, I have slipped through those as quickly as I could because I'm assuming there's some questions that I will be happy to attempt to answer. But we have Barbara with us too, who might be able to do a better job, particularly on the NPV portion.
Yeah, well, most of the questions are on NPV, although Carolyn has a question, which I don't have an answer for. Would direct popular vote make elections even more expensive? And I don't know if any studies have been done on that.
We would still be counting the votes the same way we are today. Now, if there are more voters, which we hope to see as a result, would that cost a little more because there are more voters? Maybe. But there shouldn't be anything different. I mean, we're still counting the popular vote today.
I mean, instead of bombarding, poor Pennsylvania. Oh, campaigning. Well, yeah, but Carolyn, we're saying instead of spending $1 billion in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and torturing those people, it might be spread out a little bit more. But I don't think we have the answer to that. I mean, it's crazy is what it is. But it's not so much the money spent. I think it's the value of having people's vote count and also in the down ballot. We have people in red areas or blue areas are like, oh, I'm not going to vote because so-and-so is going to win in my state. And then you don't get the down ballot stuff. So
Right.
It would be more expensive, but it might be worth it, to get more people. Now there are questions, and I see that some of them are being answered by our intrepid guests.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, so there actually are 17 states now. That number was a little bit outdated. We're up to 209. I will tell you that it has been introduced in Virginia. It normally dies. We're checking to see. There's rumors that someone, maybe Helmer, will introduce it again this year. We haven't been able to get to his staff to confirm that. But okay.
It was introduced last year and was pushed forward to 2025.
Yeah.
Not sure that it's going to be reintroduced this year.
Yeah, that's what we're. So, okay. So Susan's asking, if the states sign the compact, what is the risk that a state with a losing candidate will renege on the system? So there are legal consequences of reneging on a compact, but I don't think any of us are lawyers.
Right. They've signed a contract, so in theory they can't. Barbara, would you like to? I see Barbara's hand up.
For some reason, that question didn't come up to me. It's kind of weird. But so is the question, can a state get out of the compact?
Yeah, my candidate loses, but I still have to give all my electoral votes to that person because I'm in the compact, but I don't want to. What happens?
It would be a legal question because I mean, they'd go to end up in court. A state can get out of the compact, but there is a time period and they cannot. After the election, they cannot get out of it. They cannot get out of it. It's about the time in August or so, the 6th, between around the time of the party conventions to the election, they cannot get out of the compact. They can before. So a state legislature could renege. In fact, Colorado passed it several years ago, and then there was a group of citizens who didn't want it passed and they wanted to repeal it right away, and they had a whole referendum effort to try to repeal it. And it did not pass. So Colorado is still in the compact. But they could have if they had been successful. So that's why it's important. Like right now I'm in Illinois. I'm working with Wisconsin to get it passed in Wisconsin. It has not yet been passed in Wisconsin. In fact, it hasn't come up for hearing since 2008. So we're still working hard in Wisconsin, but I live in a Chicago suburb now. It's passed in Illinois. But I think it's important in states that it's passed to keep it up front. Because first of all, how many of us, league members even know about national popular vote unless it comes up? And if it's passed like 10 years ago, people have no idea. League members don't, educated people don't, very few people do. So it's important to keep it up, even in states that have passed it. Sorry, I went a little further than the question.
No.
Well, no, that's fine. That's fine. I think you answered all the other ones in chat. Again, none of us are lawyers, so the question was, so a court case would go to the state court, but I'm sure that it would eventually, Susan Potter is saying it could be styled as a dispute among the states. So if it's a dispute among the states, that gives the Supreme Court automatic jurisdiction over it. A dispute between the states. I mean, so yes, it could wind up in the Supreme Court.
That's a good point. Yeah. If it was a state sued another state.
Right. That's
I don't know where that go. They're like everything. They're likely, if it gets passed by enough states to become law, become active, there will likely be litigation, but that shouldn't stop us. I mean, we want direct election of the president. How do we get there? Obviously, a constitutional amendment is the golden star, right? We were going for that. But that's not going to happen very quickly. Doesn't mean we shouldn't work on it. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't work on abolishing the Electoral College and at the same time making it come forward, making direct election or almost direct election the same result by the national popular vote. We can do that and hopefully get it passed maybe by 2028 and have the same result. Think about how the women got the vote, how that started out state by state first before it became throughout a national law, a constitutional amendment. Same type of thing that we're hoping that as things get momentum and we get a direct vote in by the national popular vote and we get used to it. Look at our Obamacare. Look how that's been fought. And since 2010, most people still want Obamacare, right? So it's kind of how you get started and how you spread the word and get people acclimated. So it can tell I'm a very big cheerleader for national popular vote.
And Carolyn, I don't know if we would have riots in the streets if Virginia's electoral votes went to somebody else the voters didn't choose. I mean, it could be a lot of reasons for riots in the streets these days. So, might as well.
Let me address that if I might, because that comes up in a lot of states where certain legislatures don't want to pass it. They're saying, hey, we wouldn't, especially the battleground states, hey, we wouldn't count as much. Wait a minute. The population that votes in that state for, let's call it the second place candidate, their votes are basically discarded. They don't count. They already don't count a huge portion of their population's votes because it's whoever wins in the state right now. Right now, it's whoever wins in the state gets all of that state's electoral votes. Okay?
Right.
What happens to the votes of all the other people in the state that didn't vote for the first place candidate? They're gone. With a
Linda.
national popular vote or with a constitutional amendment, every vote counts. That is the big difference. It's kind of a shell game, I guess, when they start bringing up that argument. It's a shell game because don't they want all their people's votes to count for president?
True. So if you voted for Trump in Virginia, your vote was thrown out since Virginia went for Harris. And when they certify, which they, have already certified the election in the elect has, so your vote has been thrown out. So it's the same thing, only different, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just that this is the president of all Americans. Every one of our votes should count. It shouldn't matter where you live, as long as you live in the country and you're a citizen, right?
And I said this, and I believe I'm right, that we are the only democracy, representative republic, whatever you want to call it,
You're right.
that has this crazy system.
Yeah.
Nobody else, and Europeans look at us like, okay, nobody else does this. It's everybody else you vote, that person wins. There's nothing in between.
I should relay a humorous story. I was in London in 2000, and I was on the train headed to the airport, and a gentleman sitting next to me said, "You're from the United States?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "What is this Electoral College? Is it a university?" He was from Oman and very well spoken and educated and curious, because he couldn't figure out what this Electoral College thing was.
College. Well, it's a college. Yeah, it's a university.
Is it I said, no. It's and fortunately, I wrote my 8th grade government paper on the Electoral College, so I could answer him. Most people wouldn't have had a clue.
See, those 8th grade papers. All right. I do not see any other questions popping up.
Pat's hand. Are you?
Oh,
Can
I can't see hands. Okay.
Before we
wait.
end, I'd like to say something too.
Sure. Let me unpin you so I can see things. Pat, is that Pat Worth or Pat Faggy?
Yeah, I just wanted to
Oh.
I wanted to recommend this book. It's called Making Democracy Count, and it's written by a math professor. And if you want to delve into the mathematics of the Electoral College, the House of Representatives, this is a terrific book, and he doesn't do it from a partisan standpoint. He does it from a factual mathematics standpoint. And even because I am not a math person, he does it in a way that you can actually understand what he's talking about. So in Fairfax, it's in the public library. It might be in the public library where you live as well.
And I have a copy of the book. It has a great chapter on ranked choice voting too.
Yes.
And Jane is a math person, and I get itchy when I hear the word. For those of us who hate math and bring back, images of nuns in math, if you like history, that one I put in Fraud of the Century about Hayes and Tilden. I mean, you talk about fraud. I mean, it's crazy. Susan Potter, your hand is up.
Thanks. I just have to mention this. In 1972, I was 14 years old. You can do the math. And I did two things. Two things happened that are pertinent to this discussion. One is there was a big demonstration for the ERA, and my little sister and I lived in Alexandria, and my little sister and I rode our bikes over to that demonstration and locked them up and went to the demonstration. That was the first one we ever went to of any kind where we went by ourselves. And then the second thing is, and this is really pertinent to the timeline here. I wrote an essay in 8th grade social studies. Social studies was my thing. I'm sure that's true for most of you too. And I won for the Metro DC area the social studies essay contest, and the subject was why the Electoral College should be abolished. Okay.
Oh, gosh.
Now, it makes me happy to point that out because I won a $100 certificate, which was big money back then. It makes me kind of sad because that was 52 years ago. That was 52 years ago. And I don't think that we need to think of this as I'm kind of trying to slip into the lazy habit of saying with urgency, but I think we need to think about of the suffragists and say,
Yep.
this is a decades-long project, and you're making
Yeah.
progress, and you've been making progress while I've been ignoring it. Well, shame on me. But thank you. Thank you for pursuing it.
No, that's true. And the late Dr. T, our president, when she introduced this at council 3 years ago, she says, none of us are probably going to be here when this happens, but that shouldn't stop us, because the suffragists who started, most of them didn't get to vote, and that shouldn't be stopping. So anyway, we are approaching the witching hour. My thanks.
Okay, Barbara wanted to say something.
I'm sorry. Yes, Barbara, you want to say?
I just wanted, you probably can see in the chat, I keep putting the email npvnetwork@gmail.com. So that's this network we've started just recently after the last U.S. League of Women Voters U.S. convention in June in D.C. So we put on a workshop. So we have people interested from around the country. So far, for the next one, I know there's at least 3 or 4 Virginia people. The idea is to let people form their own groups. I'm delighted to hear when Jane said that you've got an issues group formed or starting or trying to start one for the Electoral College Moonshot. Great. That's super. This is kind of a how-to. So people can find other people in their state, which sounds like you're ahead of us on that. But also, like, it's a go-to. Do you need help with national popular vote? We are going, here are some resources, what you can need to do to get started. So people just don't kind of go like, ooh, what do we do? And so if you'd like to join, the next one is December 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So just send an email to that email and we'll get a registration to you. I also want to acknowledge, I see that Rosemary Heilman and Joyce Williams have been on. They have been working on the abolishment of the Electoral College forever and doing a super job and unrelenting. And that's great, because we got to be unrelenting. So that, that's just how it is. We want it abolished. So I also wanted to acknowledge them. So they've worked really hard. But the two work together. They really do work together. One's the first step. We got to take the first step and keep going. Thanks, you guys, for inviting me. It was
Thank you.
Great presentation.
One of the things that when we get the issue group together, we need to talk about is who else besides the league is interested in this? Who else can we reach out to? After the last NPV network meeting, I actually was contacted by a group from the Unitarian Universal Church of Lynchburg, who apparently this is one of their issues. NPV compacts. So it's great to know that we're not the only ones interested, and we need to rally the rest of the groups.
I'll let my use. Yay. Okay. Jane will give us these slides. This will be up on our YouTube. It'll go to everybody who has RSVP'd, the video and the slides, and it'll be in our January 1st newsletter. And again, I thank Barbara and Jane for taking this on. Thank you all for coming. And we'll get it done one way or another. Thank you, guys. Happy holidays. Bye-bye.